In my opinion, one of the greatest sales books is Spin Selling, written by the amazing Neil Rackham. But what you might not know is that Neil is a scientist, not a salesman. Let's have ourselves a pocket-sized pep talk because I have another scientist here today who's going to be talking about selling as well.
A pocket-sized pep talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Stuart Webb, is an entrepreneur, he's a mentor, he's an author, he's a podcast host who specializes in sales and marketing, and in his earlier days, he's a scientist. I was a guest on Stuart's podcast, It's Not Rocket Science, 5 Questions Over Coffee. We had a terrific conversation, and quite frankly, I wanted more. So here he is. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Hi, Rob. Well, it's good to see you again. How are you doing?
It is good to see you. Just fine, hanging in there, and it's a pleasure to be on the other side this time. I was the guy in the seat. Now I'll put you in the seat.
I like it.
So let's get to work. Let's start talking a little bit about your podcast, because I've been on a lot of podcasts and yours was very unique. 5 questions. It's not rocket science. 5 questions over coffee. Tell me about that podcast, and particularly the format you created, because like I said, sure. I don't hear it a whole lot.
Sure. So I mean, the podcast was created largely because I've got an audience of people, but I came to the conclusion they were probably bored of hearing from me. And, one of the things that I learned as a scientist is that, we all have to stand on the shoulders of giants. We all spend our life looking for the people that have got great ideas and building on them. So I wanted to get some of those giants, such as yourself, into my audience and give them some of the great ideas that are out there. Because I know for an absolute fact I do not have all the great ideas. And the reason I did 5 questions, if I'm absolutely honest to you, you'll know from this, there are actually 4 questions plus the question, which is, what's the question I should have asked? So there are only really 4 questions I asked. There's one question, which is, please ask me a question almost, or get me to tell me the question I should have asked you. And the reason I do that is because, if I'm honest, I think if you can't explain what you do in 4 questions, you're making it too complicated. So I'm trying to get people to boil down very simply what it is they do, who's their ideal client, what it is they do for that client, the mistakes those clients are making, and then say, and this is how I help them. And if you can't do that in just 4 simple questions, you're making it too complicated, because nobody's got that many problems.
Wow. That's really interesting. The only part that I struggled with is people tired of hearing from you, because I immediately put that on me and I went, are people tired of hearing from me? That's impossible. I'm Rob Jollis. It can't be. But all right, I hear you. So let's pick up on the scientist part. You're a scientist. What lessons did you learn as a scientist that help you? Because I know you mentor CEOs. How are you transferring that into the business world?
So let's talk about the 2 big ones, I guess, Rob. One of which is, on the television, on the films, you see the mad scientist who's alone in his lab, dark at night, working on their sort of great innovation. And there's just one of them and they're completely on their own. That is not the reality of most scientists. As I said, most scientists realize they are standing on shoulders of giants, people who have gone before, people around them who are doing great things. And you have to just say, I'm going to take an idea from you and I'm going to build upon it and make it better. So actually, we work in large teams. We work in some really complex teams, working with government institutions, working with universities, working with businesses. So the first lesson I learned as a scientist was how to be collaborative and how to work as part of a team and make that harmonious, not trying to make me the center of anything, but actually being one of the team. So that's the first lesson that I'm really pushing out to CEOs on a regular basis, which is, you have got to have a well-functioning team, and that team has to have multiple parts, from the person who washes the floor right the way up to the CEO suite. So, you've really got quite a lot of different parts that you've got to go. The other thing that I learned as a scientist, which I think is the absolute critical one that I push a lot, which is that for you to be successful, you can't be changing the game every single day. You have to have some very solid ground rules that you operate every single day that makes things work. Now, I learned that in order to be a scientist, I had to be able to do an experiment, change one thing and find out what happened, and then repeat that experiment to prove that it was real before anybody would say, yeah, you've proved a point. And that's the way I think most businesses have to work. They go around changing too many things and go, okay, we want to do that again. We want to have more success with that marketing strategy. What did we do? And the answer is, most of the time, they can't tell you. They can't tell you what happened and what worked because they changed too many things. I'm a great fan of saying, get it stable, change one or thing, do it again, repeat it, see what results you get. Then you can repeat again and again and again. And I say this a lot to CEOs who turn around and go, but we haven't got the time to do that. And I go, no, you have. You've got to get to a stage where you can say, I know what's working, and I'm only going to change one thing tomorrow because I could blow it all again. So it's all about those two things: having a team and understanding how the team works together, making sure that you've got rock solid foundations built upon really repeatable processes that will bring success after success.
Well, I'm going to throw a word at you that we actually don't use in the US as much, but you guys do a lot. And that is the word brilliant. It always makes me laugh, because if you've ever seen an American, when you just say, oh, brilliant, we'll tend to sort of back up and go, really? Because we take that word very seriously. I actually think that's brilliant from a couple of different angles. And I mean it from an American version of brilliant. So take that as a bigger compliment. Couple of areas. First of all, I used to coach basketball, not on a professional level, but I had over 50 teams I coached. And so I was a student of other great coaches. And one of the greatest coaches in the US, particularly in the 60s and the 70s, was a coach named John Wooden, coach for UCLA. Amazing record of success, one that we probably won't see repeated. But he wrote a book, and I read his book, Be Quick But Don't Hurry. And one of the things that he said right on the back of the book, and this is this winningest coach, he said, quite simply, the team with the best players usually wins. And as ridiculously simple as that is, unpack it for a moment, and it speaks to what you're talking about, which is getting the right people. I had no idea until I started really working with managers how much time they spend trying to hire the right person. And Stuart, they better, because hiring the wrong person can be, if they think there's time and energy going into hiring the right person, hire the wrong one. See how that works for you.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of my time, because when I left the virus world, because I was a virologist, so I was working in labs. I left, and I was sort of thrown into a position, and they sort of turned around to me and said, you should go and be this, should go and be the manager. And I sort of went, yeah, I can be a manager. And immediately I realized the one thing that I had as a manager was my ability to influence people. But what I didn't have was my ability to change the way they thought. I could only change the way they behaved. So I spent all of my time saying, I want this behavior out of you. I want this behavior out of you. Because I realized that in actual fact, I couldn't change what they believed. I couldn't change what they understood, necessarily what they understood, but I could change the way they behaved together. And I worked and worked and worked, getting to the stage where I had, I boiled it down to 4 simple rules, 4 simple things I did with every person. And those 4 things were the rock solid. Now, a couple of the people that I had working for me now, one of them's gone on to be the CEO of an insurance company. Another one set up her own company after working for Australia Post Office and things like that. And they ring me up and they go, oh, can you just talk to me about something I should be doing? I go, guys, you know far more than me. And they go, oh, no, you gave me the bedrock. And I can't now operate without thinking about those 4 rules you taught me. It's all about getting the right behaviors in those people and making sure those behaviors are all working together within the team.
Well, you're actually reading my mind, because the one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you and I wrote down was about about the management issue. So many, remember, I'm sort of branded as, sales trainer, salesperson. That's what I do. So when I wander in, I go, well, your managers are doing some persuading as well, or at least I hope so. My basic definition of sales is always taking an idea, putting it in somebody else's brain and making them feel like they thought of it. What manager would not want to acquire that skill?
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's stay there. because I love the fact you're doing it. Believe me, I'm the one battling companies going, you need to teach your managers how to sell. I don't care if you're not a selling organization. They have to be able to persuade and influence, and we'll do it in an ethical manner. So I want to hear from you some key skills that you think the managers need to know as we merge scientists, sales, and management together. Good luck with that one. Let me hear your thoughts.
Let's go with this one. Let me get those 4 rules, those 4 things that I used to teach those guys that I was teaching to be managers.
Okay.
Those 4 things are quite simple. The first one is you have to know the people that are working for you. You know, the number of times, and it's so true today. We are now in a very different world. We're in this hybrid world. You and I, Rob, we're thousands of miles apart, but we're meeting. And we're getting to know each other. So I said the first thing that you have to know as a manager is who are the people that are working for you. If you don't know the names of the children of the people who work for you, you are likely to end up in a situation where one day you say, I need you to stay late. And I need you to stay late because it's really important for our customer. And if you can't then follow it up with, and that's going to really affect Rob's basketball game tonight, and I know that you're really committed to it, and I'll make it up to you, you're going to fail to persuade them to be with you. They're just not going to be interested. So get to know your people. And I advocate getting to know them by making sure you have a weekly meeting with them. That's the other thing. You have to have at least once a week, at most outside once every 2 weeks, a meeting with them where you are sitting there and discussing with them their development, the task that they've got, and they get the opportunity to talk to you. So, you know, make that time, put it in your diary, make sure it's absolutely sacrosanct. And if you're in a hybrid world, make sure that Zoom meeting or Teams meeting or whatever it is booked in to make sure that you're doing it. I then talk to them about what is the right way to delegate work, because that's another thing that managers do so poorly. They don't know how to delegate work. They think delegating work is all about sitting on the employee and making sure that manager is making sure that person does what they're told. But I keep saying, no, it's not. It's about explaining to them how it works with the rest of the tasks that the team are doing. And it's about telling them what the standard and the timings are for what they need to do. And then get out of their way. Because so long as they're telling you how far they are with the task, that's all you've got to do. Is just make sure that they know what they've got to do, when they've got to do it. And finally, the next thing that you really have to do is when you see them and doing that task, if they're not coming quite up to the standard, or if they're falling short because of something, step in and say, how do I help you get better? In other words, what that coach does. You know, the coach in the basketball team, he may not have been the best shooter, but he certainly knew how to turn around to the best shooter and say, there's something not quite right. What do I have to do to help you get that shot in the basket every time? And if the shot, if the team, you know, if the player turns around and says, look, I just need more time, or I need some additional support, you go, okay, I can do it. If they turn around and go, I need a book in order to learn exactly how I should be holding the ball, okay, let's go find you a book. That support and coaching element is so critical. And yet so many managers are there going, I don't know what to do for this person. They're apparently failing, but it's not up to me. It's up to them. The manager's job is to step in and give that coaching support.
Wow. I want to throw one at you. I love them. And by the way, I would think that when you hit on delegation, I used to teach management training, and it consisted of, I think it was 23 or 24 different skill sets. Delegation was my second favorite one because so many people don't do it, and it's not their fault. They you know, I'm speaking to you as a scientist now. They've never really been taught a process to properly delegate. So it's one thing to say, hey, Stuart, you need to delegate a little bit more. It's another thing to actually provide them with a job aid, a tool, practice on exactly how to do that, so that it's not it. I think many managers don't delegate because they're afraid it won't be done properly. You know, I've run into that as a parent with my kids when they were younger, and that's not helping anybody. But love the fact you isolated delegation. I want to throw one at you, and just curious what you think. If we made a fifth one, because it's your list, I'm just tagging along. But what about recognition?
Oh,
you know. And maybe, Stuart, we can tag in because recognition isn't, I want to tell you what a great job you did. Oh, by the way, if you could only do this part better, because now we just poisoned the well. But I actually know that in the process of recognition is the last step. What can I do to help you, open that. Yeah, go ahead.
You've hit a great one there, Rob, because the other thing I used to take to managers, which was absolutely critical to making sure they were successful, was providing feedback. Now that was both, as I would say, you both need to praise and adjust. So, I was talking to a manager of a recruitment company only last week. And this young lady's been brought in by the director, and they've been sort of basically said, the team's non-functional, get it right. And she said to me, what should I do? So I said, well, the first thing you should do for the next 2 weeks, every time you see somebody who's doing something great, some behavior that you want to see repeated, say, hey, Sandy, you're doing a great job. Love what you're doing. Can I see more of that from you? And they will start to really think about, if I want to get that hit again, if I want to hear that again, I'll make sure I do it. And I said, after about 2 weeks, don't just keep saying that. Say, hey, Rob, can I just have a chat? When you came in late to that meeting, it really disturbed the team flow. Can you do something about that? And I said, you need to balance it so that the minute you see something going on, the minute you see something which you think to yourself is either working or not working, you just immediately mention it. And the thing is that you don't turn around and just do the negative, I want to adjust some behavior. You've got to keep reinforcing the positives and the great behavior. Eventually, if you get to the stage where you're not saying anything negative and just positive, you've achieved your goal. And she looked at me and she went, that doesn't sound very difficult. And I went, no, it's not difficult. What made you think it would be difficult? She went, I was expecting a really hard lesson. And I went, no, it's very, very simple. Every time you see something good, say, love what you're doing. Thanks. Can I see more? Every time you see something that you don't want, you turn around and say, that's not helping. Can you do less of it? And what are you going to do about it? And that's it. And I said, if you give feedback to somebody 25 times a day, tomorrow it might be 24. You've just got to keep going.
Absolutely. And something, Stuart, really good point, because I'm thinking about back on my corporate days. I didn't mind hearing a manager politely and perhaps pull me off the side and tell me, Rob, I need a little more out of that. And I certainly loved the part where Rob really liked what you did. It would drive me crazy and make me anxious and wake me up in the middle of the night. I don't know what my manager is thinking. I don't know if I'm hitting this out of the ballpark or not. And that inability to understand that made me paranoid, made others around us paranoid. So I love the fact of how much repetition you're talking about, because I don't think that's instinctive for most managers. They're looking for the home run. They're looking for the great thing to recognize. And yet I always maintain, look, not everybody's a home run hitter. Sometimes you've got somebody there, they're never going to be a home run hitter, but by golly, Stuart, they're at that desk at 8 a.m. every morning. If we recognize that, you think they're going to be late tomorrow? And oh, by the way, without tagging it along, it may begin to spread to other things. Open that conversation, you said. I love that. And I'm walking away with the thought of even more feedback both ways. So no one's heart rate is jumping when I go, Stuart, may I see you in my office for a moment?
Exactly.
If we're only going in there once a year or twice a year for bad stuff, no wonder we go thump with the thump with the thump with the thump with the thump. So I love it. It's just honest feedback.
Exactly. The thing that I could never get around I was sort of told, about this, the sandwich, you sort of, you give good feedback, bad feedback. I could never do that because I kept thinking, I can't do it that quickly. And the writing it all down and saving it up for the sort of once a month or once a year that you saw somebody and you say, we'll talk to you about all these things. It was just easier for me to go, hey, something, I like that. And can we have more of it? And I don't like that. Can we have less of it? And that was it. And it was one of those things that when you got to the annual review, there was no big surprise because they'd sit there and go, well, I think you've said everything you want to say in the last couple of months. And you go, yeah, absolutely. By the way, great job. Keep going. And that was the annual review. It was so much easier.
Yeah. Oh, I would have liked to have you as my boss. I really would have. I had one boss like that right at the end of my Xerox days. And he caught me by surprise because the first thing I got wasn't real good from him, what he was telling me. And it was a little bit, it broke my spirit a little bit, but he kept talking to me. All of a sudden, walked by me and said, that one I like. And I realized this guy's just telling me what's on his mind.
Yeah.
I didn't, Stuart, it caught me by surprise. I never heard that before. And it's almost embarrassing to say, how can that be an anomaly to tell somebody what's on your mind?
Isn't that sad, Rob, that we've got
Yeah.
so many managers walking around who just haven't been told some of this stuff?
Yeah.
The thing is that, and this is possibly, where we come back to my background. I came into this stuff because I didn't have a grounding in any of this. I never studied this at college or whatever. I was thrown into this as sort of somebody who came out of a completely different world and thought, I've got to find out the rules because I don't know what the rules are very quickly. And I sort of developed these rules because I thought, okay, going back to my scientific days, it would appear the way I have to do this is I have to try something. And if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, stop it. So I try out different ideas. And eventually I was landing on things and going, okay, that's a good thing. I've got to remember to do that. That's a bad thing. Don't do that again.
Right.
And these were little natural experiments I was running all the time until I eventually went, okay, got the rule, write it down, never forget it. And yet, nobody sort of turned around to me and went, that's wrong, or you shouldn't be doing that. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just keep doing this stuff then. But, eventually when I started talking to other managers and going, this is the way I do it, they go, oh, nobody's ever told me this stuff. And that's when I started telling them. I started saying, okay, let me tell you about my way of doing it and let me explain it to you.
Right.
Alex went on and did her thing. Rashid, he's now a great CEO. He just sort of picked up on this stuff and he went, I just love this. I just want to do more of it. And so you roll it out.
Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. Science and social behaviors doing the tango. Let me ask you a question, push off the manager for a moment, and let me ask you a question that you asked me. And one of your four. I'm not going to, don't worry. I'm not, you've got your own format there. But mistakes that clients are making. I found that to be interesting when you asked me that question in terms of sales or marketing. So I pushed that one back to you. I won't ask you another one of yours, but I was curious how you'd answer that question.
So, the two things that I think so many, another great story, right? I love telling stories. That's the other thing. In case you haven't noticed, I love telling stories. So I was talking to somebody who's got a reasonably successful business. And I just said to them, I said, look, can you just tell me exactly who it is that you're trying to target? And they went, well, it's everybody. And I was sort of like, no, it's not. It's just never everybody. That's just not an answer. And they said, well, it's difficult because I'm just thinking of hiring a social media manager because if I can shout louder above the noise, I'll get more leads and I'll get more people coming to me. And I said, but if you're trying to shout louder and everybody else starts shouting louder, what makes you think you'll be more successful? I said, what I would prefer to hear you doing is really having a very clear understanding of who it is that you're trying to reach and what the problem is they have. And then instead of shouting, lean forward, whisper in their ear and just say, I have the solution to your problem. And you'll find that those people are not going to be begging, you're not going to be trying to sell something to them. They will be begging to have it from you. So many of my clients that I'm working with are saying things like, I've got to hire a social media manager. We've got to get on Pinterest or TikTok or whatever, because we're not on that platform and we're missing a chunk of the market. And I go, well, seriously, just give me a really good definition of the person that you're trying to reach. If there's one person in the world and they've got the problem that that you can solve, what is it? And why are they passionate about having that problem solved? And eventually you get down to, as I did with a client recently, Ralph had, he eventually sort of said, he had a lighting company and he basically said, this is the sort of building that I wish to put my lights in. So I said, okay, let's find 10 people with a project where they're going to develop that building. And you go to them and you tell them that you've got the solution to the lighting problem in their building. And from those 10 clients, he won 8. And the reason he won 8 is because he was really specific about who he was trying to target, really specific about the solution he had to their problem. And those 8 people just went, I've been looking for you all my life. And that was it. It didn't take 3,000 emails. He wasn't spraying adverts everywhere. He identified 10 ideal people. He went and spoke to 10 ideal people. 8 of them said, I've been waiting for you. I think the other 2 are probably just sitting in the background waiting for the right project. But, that's the sort of result that I kind of keep coming back to.
Yeah.
So many people are going, I just need to shout louder. And I go, no, they don't. What you need to have is a really clear idea of exactly who it is, what their problem is. And we come back to why I call it, it's not rocket science, Because, Rob, it isn't rocket science, is it? It's not difficult. It's just that everybody kind of tries to make it difficult. Everybody kind of thinks there's a great rule around it that they haven't yet discovered. In actual fact, it's really very simple. They're just not necessarily stepping back long enough and thinking hard enough about making sure they've actually clarified that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm laughing for a few reasons. First of all, I love when you said you like telling stories. It's like, look, the man likes telling stories, folks. Yeah, so do I. So do most communicators. You came to the right place to tell stories. It's interesting. I'll tell you a fast story that dovetails to what you just said. You know, when I used to teach for Xerox, some of my classes were 2 and 3 weeks long. It's a lot of information. And occasionally I'd be asked, you know, what in training, we have that rule of thumb: emphasize everything, emphasize nothing. You know, what would be a couple of words that I'd want to put in front of a salesperson while they were selling, and they were doing role plays on camera every day? I couldn't litter the wall with 500 different things. They'd find nothing. I chose 2 words, Stuart. And the 2 words I put up that I wanted every salesperson to see every time they looked up were the words, "You said." That's all I put out there, because the only way they could use those words, if they were asking questions and listening, if they were taking the phrases and the words the client was saying and then merging them with whatever suggestions or solutions they had. But I'm not just showing you this coffee cup because I like coffee. I'm showing this coffee cup to you because you said earlier that your coffee was getting cold and you needed something to keep it warm. This will do it. Now I'll tell you how. But the words you said was always my way of trying to put training wheels on that bike of, I need you to get to use the language of the customer. And the only way to do it is to ask questions and listen.
Rob, I'm going to be stealing that. That is brilliant. And that's brilliant in your sense.
Because
that is, I love, you said, I think that is absolutely fantastic. I've got a client that I'm going to be going and talking to tomorrow, because I know he needs to hear those 2 words, and he's been really struggling to know exactly what he's got to do. I've now just got to go back to him and say, I just got it from you. This guy, Rob, has given it to me. It's "you said." Now, go use those 2 words in every conversation that you have, because you're absolutely right. If you're not listening, if you're not thinking about what it is that customer interaction just said to you, you never get to know them. You never get to understand what their problem is, and you can never solve it.
Right. You know, and that was the cool part, you know, of your fellow scientists, your fellow British scientists, Rackham. You know, one thing when I read Neil Rackham's book, Spin Selling, that just changed my world was I always thought that people buy based on needs, you know, find out what they need and then sell them what they need. And Rackham, because he wasn't a salesperson, he was just looking at data. So, well, that's interesting. Unfortunately, the data doesn't support that, but, you know, keep asking people what they need. Rackham was the first person who actually made to me, a scientific link to the data suggests that when somebody is considering a change, that it begins with a problem. Mm-hmm. And when the problem becomes big enough, then it becomes a need. And when when we understand the need, then we can offer a solution. Why am I asking you what you need? Why wouldn't I be asking you to tell me more about the challenges that you're having? And oh, by the way, Stuart, a lot more people are walking around with challenges that they haven't decided to address yet than walking around with needs they want to hand a salesperson. I'd rather deal with in the pool of people that aren't dealing with salespeople yet, that are struggling, and maybe I can help them get past that. That's what a scientist taught me. So I got a question for you. It's my last sales question, but
okay.
Now I'm looking at you. I want me to put back on your scientist hat if it ever came off, and give me something that, you know, either repeatable and predictable, but something that is not emotional. It's just really more fact and reason. That if you were if you're talking to this audience, one thing that you've discovered that if they remember nothing else, remember this from the scientist who studies sales.
So the thing that the scientist would probably say is, look, let's go back to, you know, my scientific days when I learned that actually the thing that you're trying to do in your business is only change one thing at a time. If you're changing 15 things, you can never be sure if there's growth or there's a decrease in your business, what the thing was that happened. So my one thing that I keep saying to somebody is, don't keep changing everything. If you want to try something, very slowly change the one thing. The one thing that I change on a daily basis, if you like, is I look at the numbers of things that I'm trying, and I will test pretty much everything. Yeah, I test headlines, I test colors, I test all sorts of things in order to see which one gets a better response. But the one thing that I never do is change two things at a time. If you've got an advert that's working and you want to see whether or not the red headline or the green headline works better, just the headline. Don't change the image at the same time. There's just too much variability. People are so keen at saying, oh, I've got a great idea. Why don't we do this? And then you look at it and go, well, I can't tell what happened. The scientist in me basically keeps saying one thing at a time, one small step. And, some of those steps are really small. Some of those steps are really tiny. The one that, when I made some of my greatest scientific discoveries, I was working on tiny, tiny, tiny changes. But over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different experiments, suddenly added up to this momentous change. And the best way I've described this to a couple of people is, too often we think business is a bit like a volcano. We see lots of sort of fire and it spews out gas and great lumps of rock. And you look at it, you go, that's fantastic. But the businesses that are built on volcanoes are just like the mountains that are built on volcanoes. Along comes a storm and it washes them away. Mountains like the Himalayas, or I think you might in the States call them Himalayas, but the Himalayas, they're built because over thousands and thousands and thousands and many thousands of years, the rocks bump together and slowly push them up. That for me is what really builds good businesses, is tiny, tiny changes which you use to sort of really build the team and build the foundations. If you've got lots of fire and smoke, you're probably going to have a business that's going to be very easily washed away. So I'm really keen on small incremental changes on a constant testing basis.
Well, you're making the Zeroid over here very happy, because one of the courses I taught was we used to call it leadership through quality at Xerox, but it was problem solving and quality improvement. And it was all process related. And one of the biggest things that we were trying to teach almost as a culture within the organization was exactly what you've said, which was, first of all, prove that what you're about to fix needs fixing. Okay. Right. So, because a lot of people, I stubbed my toe in the corner there. Apparently everyone must. So we sometimes jump to wanting to fix things too fast, but then for goodness sakes, fix it right the first time. And the only way to do that is what you just said, which is, how can you be fixing multiple things? One might be counteracting what you're fixing anyway, but how could you do a quality job of this if you're doing multiple things at a time? If everybody and that was Xerox's philosophy, by the way. I thought it was brilliant. Yeah. Over 100,000 people, it was a condition of employment. We were tasked with 2 quality or problem solving projects a year, but everyone was taking that small little thing that you talked about, Stuart, proving the problem existed, looking at multiple reasons as to why, expanding and contracting, looking at multiple solutions, contracting the solutions based on criteria, and then doing that one thing really well. And we had over 100,000 people doing the same thing. How could a company not benefit from that? But we had to be taught. It's not instinctive.
It isn't. It's instinctive, isn't it, Rob? That's the problem. Too many people think that this stuff sort of comes by sort of, you just arrive with this knowledge. You don't. You have to win it hard, and you have to learn the lesson of doing it wrong. I did that. I did a few things wrong when I sort of left the lab and thought, I'm going to go out and do this thing. I made loads of mistakes, but I pretty soon learned, if I don't start writing down the one thing that I've just done that's worked and repeat it, I'm just going to keep making the same mistake and getting the same burn.
Yeah. You just walked into my final question, by the way, which is I told you, I'm only going to ask one of the big rocket science questions. So I'm going to ask it a little bit differently. Rather than what question should I have asked, I was going to ask you, looking back on your career, what would you change, if anything?
Oh, now that's a tough one. The only thing that I'd have changed is I too often stayed comfortable for too long. The one thing that you should never do when you're building a business is stay comfortable. Yeah, be constantly trying to change that one thing, but certainly don't get to the stage where you're comfortable and you go, oh, this is great. I'm just going to relax for a bit and just enjoy the ride. Do you know, I spent a couple of years when I was just enjoying the ride, and then I suddenly realized I'd lost my edge. I was no longer attempting to change that one thing and continue to grow. I'd lost it. And I kicked myself and went, no, you never should have just relaxed. You should always be pushing for that. Even if it's that 1% improvement, be always looking for that 1% improvement. So yeah, get back out there and look for that improvement. I got comfortable and I thought, yeah, this is good. I've got to the size business. Everything's great. And I coasted, and I regret coasting because it was just not the right thing to do.
Beautiful words of wisdom for sure, and a great way to finish our conversation. I know talking to entrepreneurs or people that have these dreams and visions, and sometimes, I'll mentor or coach them, or just hear about their dream. But, one universal piece from anyone who's typically tried to build something on their own is always the same. I wish I had done it earlier. I wish, because that fear of change and that getting comfortable of not really being where they want to be, but it's comfortable. I've never met an entrepreneur who said, I should have waited to leave later.
Yeah.
So,
just dreadful.
Yeah. Listen, you've got a book, you've got an ebook. Tell me about that, and then we'll wrap on that. Yes.
Yeah, Rob. So I'm happy for people to go to a landing page I've got, and I think you've said you're going to put it in the show notes.
Yes.
Go to a landing page. There's the book I helped co-write. It's got all of this stuff in. It sort of talks about some of this stuff. I don't try to sell it on Amazon or anything like that. This is something that just, I love giving back. I really like trying to sort of give back. So yeah, you can go to a web page, download this book. You get a return email with it on, and read it. Please read it. I mean, that's the one thing I do worry about. Too many times I hear people who've downloaded the book and they don't read it. This one it's an easy read. It took a while to write, but it's dead easy to read. So read through it and just take some of the stuff that I've just been talking about. I talk about things like, how to sort of really transform your marketing so that you embed sort of 9 elements to it to make sure that those elements are there. And I know that when you embed those 9 elements into that marketing, you get thousands of % increase in conversion and things like that. So take it, read it. It's all great stuff. I'm happy to let your audience have a great read of that.
Perfect. Well, as I said, we'll put it on my show notes. You'll get it on you. What's the name of the website?
My website, if you go to the complete approach profitmaximizer.com, so there's hyphens in between all of those. So the -complete -approach -profitmaximizer.com. You'll see all my stuff there. And once again, Rob, I'll put that into my show notes for you.
Perfect. All right. So we got a book to download. It's a part of me. I wish you charge $1 for it, because I do believe, I totally agree with you. Every time I give somebody a book, I always think, but are you going to read it? Here, pay me something for it, because then I know you'll read it. But so folks, read the book. Don't just get this book. Also, check out Stuart's podcast. It's not rocket science. 5 questions over coffee. I go on my fair share of podcasts, and I enjoyed the heck out of that one. And I think you can hear through this podcast today that Stuart and I have a rhythm. It's easy. I think we both kind of come from the same school. So if you're liking this podcast, I'm quite sure you're going to like Stuart's as well. Stuart, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great returning fire and putting you in the seat. And I can't thank you enough.
Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great catching up with you. And I can just say, I had a look at the number of downloads you're getting on your episode, and it's one of the highest because you were such an entertaining guest. So that's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.